All right, so this chapter we're going to start to dive into the cellular level. Our last chapter we looked at the atomic level, the molecular level. Now we're going to start looking at the cellular level of life. For this chapter, we are going to be covering all of the following topics. So how eukaryotic cells compare to prokaryotic cells, cell size and microscopy, cell structure and function, the plasma membrane, organelles, cytoskeleton, cellular respiration, and fermentation in the generation of ATP. Once again, this is a very large chapter. That we would typically cover in about 2 weeks in a regular semester. So we are going to cover all of it this week. So just hang on and don't worry, we will get through this all. Please feel free to pause your video at any time and hop onto our discussion groups or send me an email, and I'm happy to make another video or chat with you on Google Hangouts or whatever format we decide to use, and explain anything further. All right, but we are going to get started with eukaryotic cells and how they compare with prokaryotic cells. Starting off with the cell theory, just a little refresher course on this. The cell theory is a fundamental organizing principle of biology. It states the following. Number 1, the cell is the smallest unit of life. Number 2, cells make up all living things, including both unicellular and multicellular organisms. Take a moment now to just review, what does that mean? What's the difference between unicellular and multicellular organisms, and what are we as humans? Finally, new cells can only arise from pre-existing cells. And there are 2 basic types of cells that we are going to be studying: prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Before you go on in this lecture, what is the main difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells? If you have a moment or have the ability, take that time to fill in those definitions now in your notes. The main difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. All right, we're going to dive into that right here. Here is a fantastic sort of summary of the differences between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Starting right off the bat, which one is going to be structurally more simple? That is going to be our prokaryotic cells. Structurally, they're very simple. They kind of look like if you were to take a jelly bean and cut it in half. Very simple. There's a shell on the outside, there's gooey stuff in the middle, and that looks like it's just about it. Now, we are going to find that they are more complex than that, but compared to a eukaryotic cell, prokaryotic cells are nothing more than jelly beans. Eukaryotic cells are going to be structurally much more complex. Prokaryotic cells tend to be a whole lot smaller than eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are going to be a lot larger. Prokaryotic cells are going to lack membrane-bound organelles, whereas eukaryotic cells have those membrane-bound organelles. Finally, what types of organisms are prokaryotic cells? Take a moment and see if you can fill this in on your own. If you remember the 3 domains that we talked about at the beginning, which domains are prokaryotic and which domains are eukaryotic? If you said prokaryotic cells would include both bacteria and archaea, you are right. Woohoo! Well done. Eukaryotic cells, of course, are going to be eukaryotes. These are going to be found in plants, animals, fungus, and protists. So we're going to take just a moment to look at prokaryotic cells. Here's a prokaryotic cell. What we're going to find is on the outside, this yellowish region, is what's known as a cell wall. Right underneath it, we're going to find a plasma membrane. Located somewhere inside of that plasma membrane, we're going to find a DNA region. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, so they don't have a specialized location to house their DNA. They instead have what is called a nucleoid region. It's just an area where all the DNA generally hangs out. Finally, they are going to be filled with a semi-solid-like substance known as cytoplasm. This is going to be a jelly-like substance that fills up the majority of the cell. It's going to be mostly water, but it's also going to contain a lot of proteins. Anything it needs to carry out its metabolic reactions is going to be found in the cytoplasm. This cytoplasm is also dotted with these itty-bitty little yellow dots known as ribosomes. These ribosomes, we're going to spend a little bit of time on them later. These are our protein factories. They are going to take RNA and turn it into proteins. So our RNA is going to come from our DNA. Our DNA is going to be transcribed into RNA. That RNA is then going to be translated into a protein sequence with the aid of ribosomes. This is our eukaryotic cell. It's a little bit more complicated. There are a lot more organelles. There's just a lot more going on in these eukaryotic cells. There's nothing else to say, really. There's a lot more going on. We are going to take the time to go through each one of these organelles. So, there you go. We are going to spend some time going through all of these. I would like you to remember this figure 3.2. This will be an excellent study tool for you later on. You should be able to look at this in your textbook, use sticky notes or whatever you need to, cover these all up, and you should be able to, by the end of this chapter, talk yourself through this slide and be able to not only name but also describe the function of all of these organelles that you see here. Finally, table 3.1 is going to be a great review table. This will be maybe one to turn into flashcards. It's going to just review some of the features of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. All right, and that is it for section 3.1, prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells. We are going to talk about them again, and we will bring up some more differences a little bit later on, but that's just an introduction to the main differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. All right, there you go.